a very proud son of Florida and a proud member of Congress from the great state of Florida, a defender of Donald Trump, and a man who just made massive news talking about the impeachment or potential impeachment of Joe Biden. Congressman Byron Donalds joins the program. Congressman, thank you so much for being on the program. You sure do make us proud here in the state of Florida.
Hey, good. It's good to be with you, Benny, man. Thanks for having me on.
Every time I see you brawling on social media, every time I see you out going on CNN, you're like the only guy that CNN will have on that'll actually give him some chin music. I'm like, thank you. Thank you, Byron.
Well, the funny thing about that is like, I don't really think it's that big a deal. That's just how we, if you've had strong arguments, in a barbershop, with your friends watching a football game or something like that, that's how we do it. So I just try to bring that same level of passion to what we're talking about, because this isn't really about sports or music. We're talking about the future of the country. And I think also a lot of times in these news organizations, they want everybody to talk very, very calmly, very stoically. And I don't got time for that, man. The country's on the line. Let's get down to what actually matters. And if they're saying something stupid that just doesn't make any sense, I'm going to call them out on it.
All right. Well, something stupid that doesn't make any sense is for a judge who's overseen DNC cases who when she was a private attorney, argued on behalf of Hillary Clinton and Fusion GPS against Donald Trump. How does this judge remain overseeing this case in Washington, D.C.?
Oh, very simple, because they want somebody who's going to give no deference to Donald Trump whatsoever. They know this. And so the DC Circuit picked her for this thing in particularly. And people need to understand, in the DC Circuit, half of the judges all either came through Main Justice or they're deeply affiliated in Washington, D.C. So these are all people who know each other. They spent time together. They've all worked together. And so they made an internal decision about what they want to do. No more, no less. The court, the circuit could say whatever they want. I just don't believe it, because at this point, Benny, I've seen too much. The level of collusion, especially in Washington, D.C., and, the thickness of the quote unquote swamp is real. And they are playing a different game than the rest of the country is playing. It's one of the reasons why America is falling behind our adversaries around the globe.
Yeah. And swamps. There are some swamps in your district. You know swamps very well, but D.C. is worse.
Oh, significantly worse. And that's how she's on this case. And look, I think she should recuse herself as well, considering the fact that if she was going to be openly honest, that she's vehemently against Donald Trump on a personal matter. So how can you be an impartial judge when you have a personal issue with the defendant? That makes it very difficult. Anybody with common sense would do that. But we're talking about the DC Circuit here, something Congress should be looking at, by the way. But we're talking about the DC Circuit, and it's going to be very, very difficult for him. But the one benefit to the president is that this indictment, of all the indictments, is probably the silliest. I mean, the Alvin Bragg one is just stupid. That just is completely illogical. But with this DC indictment, you're saying that a candidate in an election, forget Donald Trump, put him aside for a moment. A candidate in an election is not allowed to A, voice disapproval over the results, B, allowed to find any possible way legally to find a way to get the results shifted. You're saying that they're not allowed to do that. And the only purpose of them bringing this indictment is because of what happened at the Capitol on January 6th. But guess what? They didn't charge him with conspiracy. They didn't charge him with incitement. They didn't charge him with sedition. So they don't have evidence to any of that. So this is just them being mad and trying to get Donald Trump once again.
Taking a sort of an aside here to a larger argument, do you believe that Congress should consider the DC court system itself and the sort of home rule that DC has? It was never developed as a state. It was never conceptualized as a state. It was conceptualized as a federal city that was run by the House of Representatives, and that the Speaker of the House was actually in charge of Washington, D.C., the security around D.C. It was always supposed to be simply a functionary of the federal government and the seat of the federal government in its design, and it's sort of metastasized into this capital city from the Hunger Games, right? This dark blue orb that is a reality distortion vector where you go there and no one else in the country thinks like these people. Nobody else in the country acts like these people. We have a massive country here, but somehow they have this huge outsized control based on how insular and calcified life can get there. I only speak to that. It's a passion point for me because I like 15 years there. I had to flee with my family down to Florida to have some common sense in my life. Do you think that Congress should look back into that?
Well, look, I know the left wants to look into it. They're trying to make D.C. a state, and I just think that's just completely ridiculous. And Congress, we're not going to do that. As long as we have the votes to stop it, I'm not going to vote for it. That being said, look, there's a difference between the residents of D.C., good people, they work hard, and the politics around D.C. The politics around D.C. are heavy, deep, radical Democrat policy. I mean, it's even as dumb as they put all these bike lanes in the District of Columbia, which has made traffic 10 times worse. They did it in the middle of COVID when nobody was even driving in the streets. I mean, it's stupid decisions like that, all the way to the U.S. attorney in D.C., who is supposed to be the lead prosecutor on crime, prosecutes no crime in the District of Columbia. But when it comes to the January 6th defendants, their entire focus is to not only throw the book at them, but to throw them under the jail to give them more time than even the law allows them to give them. So that there's a complete dichotomy in Washington, D.C. I was talking with some of their local activists who were in the Capitol who wanted to make D.C. a state. And I said, well, look, I got two different proposals for you. I said, one, you guys can get re-annexed by Maryland. You know, you can go back to Maryland. That's originally where you were. And they're like, oh, no, Maryland doesn't want us. I'm like, well, why not? They go, we need to be a state. I'm like, well, that's just not going to happen. You don't even have your own prison system. So how can you become a state? That's number one. Number two was, well, look, if you live in the District of Columbia and you truly believe that there is taxation without representation, how come we just tell the citizens of D.C. that they don't have to pay federal income taxes? And then they pause and they go, oh, no, that's not the solution. I said, have you people of D.C.? Because I'm quite sure if you talk to the residents of D.C., they'd be like, wait. I don't got to pay taxes. But you basically just leave me alone. I'm an enclave of the federal government? Yeah, that's the deal. Okay. If I lived in D.C., I'd be like, yo, sign me up. I'm good. But this is the nonsense that goes on there. It's very troubling what's happened to Washington. Washington has always been a great city, but it is the radicalism of the left has destroyed D.C. And it is incestuous from the mayor and the city council all the way to the actual district court system that exists there. It's a real problem. Congress needs to take a long, hard look at the federal enclave and try to find ways to remedy.
Yeah. So, I mean, part of the way the founders set this up as a political remedy was separation of powers. In the House, Republicans have the power. Will they be using it in an impeachment investigation and proceeding against Joe Biden?
I believe so. I think the pressure, not even the pressure. Let me take a step back. I think that just the reality of what's happened around Joe Biden, this web of corruption that exists around him, that actually he set up purposefully. And let me state it this way. He and his son back in 2012, 2013, started setting up all these accounts. When Barack Obama gave Hunter Biden basically authority over several Eastern Bloc countries and other countries from a foreign policy perspective, who was on Air Force Two with Joe Biden all the time? It was Hunter Biden. And don't cry me the river about Beau Biden. Beau Biden dying is a tragedy and it's wrong. And I'm sorry that happened to him. But you got to understand that every time Joe Biden gets into political trouble, what does he do? He pulls on the heartstrings of Beau Biden. Hunter Biden didn't care that he was basically sleeping with his brother's widow when he was still married to his wife. So obviously it wasn't that big of a problem for Hunter Biden. There's a web of corruption around Joe Biden. We in Congress have a responsibility to hold that accountable, because if you don't, all you're going to do is invite more corruption, not less. It must be held accountable, and the message must be sent to all politicians, Republicans and Democrats. You cannot be involved in a pay-for-play scandal. There is no, so you can't be allowed in public involved in public corruption or quid pro quos, and you can't use your family to do the dirty work while you just sit there and talk about weather on the phone.
He's talking about what? Dan Goldman sweating profusely. He was talking about the weather. We've seen some waffers on the show, man. We were laughing our asses off of that one. So
don't worry, I laugh too.
What about Republicans and this new? You sort of represent, and this is where I wanted to go in this interview, because you represent a new type of Republican who isn't actually scared of a bare knuckle brawl, who isn't actually scared to get in and fight, and isn't worried about the use of power, wielding power. And does this new attack on Donald Trump open up an actual Republican Department of Justice into looking at election denialism claims from Hillary Clinton or Al Gore, or some of the shady dealings that happened during Trump administration part one? Do you see this sort of opening up a Pandora's box with unintended consequences for Democrats?
I do. And let me go to the first half of your question. Yeah, I'm I guess a new type of Republican. There's a lot of us, actually.
Yes.
It's not, we know the big names. You have myself, or you have Matt Gaetz, or you have, MTG or Boebert or Chip Roy. There's a lot more than just those five. Let me tell you. And really what it is, it's not people who go to DC looking for a fight. It's people who go to Washington who are tired of the same old BS that is destroying our politics and destroying our country. And we're not going to sit around and just let it happen. And the second piece is, we're not trying to be political lifers. We're not trying to be DC lifers, be in Congress for 35, 40 years. That's not the goal. That's not the mission. It's go do your job and then go back home. And so I think that when you have that kind of mindset and mentality, then you're not tied to all the trappings of the marble floors and the columns and the statues and all that other stuff. You're there to do a job. And most of the time you can't wait to get on the plane when we are on a fly out day. You want to get out of there as fast as you can. I think to the issue about the weaponization of the Department of Justice and what this Pandora's box that has been opened, what really concerns me is that you get into this political retribution, tit for tat, using the power of government. Like, I'm not afraid of being talked about. I don't care about what people say on Twitter. I agree with Dave Chappelle. It's not really a real place anyway. I'm not concerned about the New York Times writing phony articles about me or whatever the case might be. What I am concerned about is if you have a Department of Justice who just brings charges on you really to drive you bankrupt, to try to make you look bad, because that's no longer about politics. That's now personal. Now you're going after my family. You're going after my livelihood. And when you start to have an institution operate that way, whether you're going after Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton or anybody else, you are going to precipitate the destruction of our country, because you won't have a country that has a cohesion under the Constitution. You'll have a society where one side's trying to get power to go after the other. And that's not a place I want to live in. And I think it's not a place a lot of Americans, they don't want to live there either.
But it does seem as though the assured mutual destruction is the only way that it's going to end. Knowing that there's the capacity for you to get hurt in this, you F around, you find out. Like, it does seem like that is the only way that this stops.
Well, this is why I go back to the point about impeachment. If House Republicans, I'm going to be very specific now, if we play the political game of, how is this going to help us keep the majority? Or, what happens when the Democrats get back in power? Then they're only going to do this more, not less, because you've demonstrated that you're just soft and that they have nothing to fear from you. However, if you bring the evidence against Joe Biden in front of the members of Congress and say, hey, listen, if this isn't bribery, if this isn't collusion or co-conspirator charge on Hunter Biden violating FARA, if this isn't bribery, then I don't know what this is. If you can't vote for that, then don't talk to me about a phone call made to Vladimir Zelensky, and don't talk to me about the emotional impeachment post January 6th. Don't talk to me about how the Democrats ignore you in the hallway and don't want to talk business. If you can't be strong and do the right thing when it matters right now. If there's criminality that exists, yeah, it should be prosecuted. But what can't occur is the politicization of these processes, which is why I'm very proud on the oversight committee of how we've done these investigations, because we took the time to go through the steps and we let the evidence lead us. We didn't just say, let's go get Hunter Biden. We let the evidence lead us to where we are right now. So when we make our case to the American people, even to those who watch MSNBC, at least they can look at the evidence and say, well, dang, yeah, Joe was dirty. Or to quote President Trump, he's crooked Joe now.
Yeah. A final question for you, Congressman, because we just released a man on the street in Tampa. The largest and oldest black fraternity was having a big gathering here. And we went and we talked with some of the young men that were outside of the convention center. And we were asking them about Joe Biden and Donald Trump. And I kept hearing this same narrative, which is, why the hell is Hunter Biden getting off on a crack and a gun charge? That doesn't make any sense. Everyone seemed to have their own personal story about the system coming after them or their family, and about this double standard and this like rising to the level of white privilege, rising to the level of Biden privilege. And that clearly rocked the world, I think, of a lot of these young men. And we've heard that time and time again as we have federal prosecutors coming on the show saying, yo, if you had a drug charge and a gun charge together, you're going to jail forever. You're never getting out. Like Brett Tolman's on saying he's done thousands of these. You're finished. You're finished. And it's mandatory charging, actually. Like, they don't really have a choice. And how much Hunter Biden's getting carved out.
Look, you have a situation in the country where, for black men, they've seen the heavy-handed part of the criminal justice system, which is why I think in the black community, criminal justice policy has been something that some in the black community have wanted to see. I think that Donald Trump does have a real ability to take this message into inner cities across our country, because we're all watching in real time the Department of Justice basically say, we don't like you and we're going after you to take you out permanently. I think that resonates, but I think it's even bigger than that. We're in this phase where the culture wars from the left, whether it's in the criminal justice system or even dealing with the gender identity of children, what's going on in classrooms, all that stuff is resonating with black men. It's resonating with Muslim men. It's resonating with Hispanic men. And I do think that Donald Trump has a real golden opportunity to kind of focus that message to be the arbiter of just getting the country to common sense. And let's deal with things plainly as we see them, and not these stupid latte sipping diatribes from radical left professors who've never had to cut their teeth in the real world. I think Donald Trump has an ability to do that the way really nobody in our party has an ability to do it. And I think if he can find a way to fine tune that message and come with actual policy behind that, I think there's no stopping him, especially considering the fact that Joe Biden is by far the worst president we've ever had. I mean, everybody knows that.
Yes. Godspeed, Congressman. Your Twitter account, everyone must go and follow. On X, I suppose we need to correct there. On X, Byron Donalds, 500,000, 500,000 Patriots, can't be wrong. Everyone hop in there. Byron spits fire day and night. Of course, you've seen him on CNN, maybe both.
Hey, it might be coming. Be careful now. I know they're trying to sell the thing, but they might need ratings.
You have sons that play ball, right?
Yeah, my oldest son plays football at Holy Cross. Yeah.
I think I saw it. I saw it on Instagram. Yeah. Well, Godspeed, Congressman. Thank you for fighting the good fight. And everyone go and say a prayer for the congressman. He's up against one hell of a Leviathan in D.C.